going to begin with an English 1 passage, and that passage is called Back in Time, and it was the 2024 passage that was given and called Back in Time. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and paste that into the chat. So what we do, and you don't have to print it out, I'm going to go through step by step the passage, and so I'm gonna walk through step by step the whole passage with you. And I've been a Texas teacher for many, many years. I don't even think I introduced myself with all the technical situation. My name is Deborah Lewis, and I'm the owner of the Jane Schaefer Writing Program. And I started teaching many, many years ago when the test was the tabs. Most people don't even remember that. But I've been through the tabs, the teams, the TAKS, the TOS, and now the STAAR. And my philosophy is that tests come and go, but good writing is just simply good writing. But we have to help the students perform well on the test. And so this first of 3 workshops for high school teachers is to work on the STAAR non-literary passage. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to pretend that you're my students and I'm teaching them how to start this test. And so when they sit down at the test, when they sit for the test, I want them to ask for 3 to 5 sheets of paper. And that's why in the reminder that was sent to you by Alma, it asks you to bring your 4 pens and 3 to 5 sheets of paper. And so as you know, with the Jane Schaefer Writing Program, we use blue, green, black, and red as we are teaching the students the elements of a paragraph and the elements of an essay. And so we're going to use our pens, and students are allowed to use different colored pens on the test, so they may do that if they want. And they're going to ask for 3 to 5 sheets of notebook paper. And what I want them to do is with the first piece of notebook paper, and if you'd like to do this with me, please feel free to do so. Make sure that you have it ready. And what you're going to do is you're going to take this sheet of paper and you're going to fold it up 2 inches. And so you fold it up 2 inches, and then you fold it down from the top 2 inches. And then what you do is you take the bottom and you fold it all the way up to the top and crease it. And now you have the sheet that they're going to do their pre-writing on. Now, I know that there's an online tool and the students may take notes online and all of that, but I'm not a big fan of the online tools because to me, it's just another distraction on the test. And also, it can be kind of dangerous because if the students take notes and then go to a different tab and forget to save, then they lose all their notes. And so I tell my students, I say to them, look, let's pretend that you have 2 screens. And on one screen, what you're going to do is you're going to write your final draft. And the other screen, let's pretend that this is a screen, your sheets of paper, and you're going to do your pre-writing on the paper. So just like when you solve math equations, you solve them on paper. A lot of times you'll solve them on paper. We're going to solve this writing problem on paper as well. So we fold the paper, and then what we do is we write Q up here, and then an A, right? And then we draw the line. And we can go ahead and draw the line where the creases are, so the students know where the creases are and what to write. So we start with the Q and the A. This means question and answer. And then what we do is we draw a line here and a line here. And we draw another line, 2 more lines here and here. And what this is for an ECR, this is going to be our topic sentence number 1. And so I have my blue pen. And this is going to be the topic sentence number 2. And I add a T right here and tell the students to circle it to remind them to make sure that it's a transitional topic sentence. Then what we do is we take our black pen and we draw a T-chart here, and we draw a T-chart here. And this side is going to be our CDs. And this side is going to be our CMs. And then down here, we're going to have what we call our big ideas that are going to help us with our introduction and conclusion. So that is the layout of the first sheet. Now, the second sheet that we have is going to be where the students summarize the passage. And so what I have them do is I have them take a second sheet and fold it in half this way. And they can open it right up here. And here, if there is only one passage, which is what we have today, this will be our one passage, and we're going to take notes on here. If it were 2 passages, if we were doing a crossover 2 passage, then we would put passage 1 and passage 2 here. And the reason why I tell the kids to ask for 3 to 5 sheets of paper is if they mess up and they want to start again. But these are the pieces that they need to work on this. So then, now that we have our 2 pre-writing pages, right? We've got these 2 pre-writing pages ready to go for the day of the test. I will have trained my students to go straight to the writing prompt, the ECR at the end. So when they sit down at the test, the first thing they're going to do is they're going to create their pre-writing pages. And then they're going to look on the test and they're going to go to the tab for the ECR. Typically, the tab has been the last tab on the computer, on the program. And so they go to the last tab and they read the ECR prompt. And the reason why I like them to read the ECR prompt is so that they'll remember what it's asking as they read the passage. And this prompt says, explain why travelers enjoy using the National Road today. See, they haven't even read the passage. They haven't even started the passage. But when they read what the extended constructed response is going to ask, explain why travelers enjoy using the National Road today, then they know what the passage is about, right? It's called Back in Time, the National Road, and they know what they should be looking for as they are reading the passage. Also, teachers, I tell my students to go ahead and read the short constructed response, because the short constructed response many times will help the students understand what's in the passage or the passages. And then I also tell them to skim or scan the multiple choice questions. Now, these are old advanced placement language and composition and lit and composition tricks. As an AP teacher for many years, I would teach my students to skim the questions, the multiple choice questions and the prompts before you read the passage. And that helps them in their subconscious know what is expected, they're expecting to read on the passage. So as I do that, the next step then is to go to the passage. But before I do that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to this page right here that I have started on, and I'm going to teach my students to turn the prompt into a question. Find the question in the prompt. And the way to find a question in the prompt is many times it'll have the words, it'll have either why, or it might have a how question in it, or it might have a what or which question in it. If it has a why question in it, then the answer is going to have the word because. If it has a how question in it, the answer is going to have in it by or through. And typically, if there is a what or which question, the answer will have one of these to be verbs, is, are, was, or were, depending if the question is in past tense or present tense. So if we look at this, we see that it has a why in it. Why travelers, right? So it's a why question. And so that means the answer is going to have a because in it. And so up here, I'm going to have the students write the question, turn it into a question. And that would be, why do travelers enjoy using the National Road today? That's the question. And this is the question that they must answer. Why do travelers enjoy using the National Road today? And so I tell my students, now flip it, right? And write, travelers enjoy using the National Road today. And then I'm going to have because that's the answer. And this is going to be my first body paragraph. This will be my body paragraph number 1 for the ECR. And this is going to be my body paragraph number 2 topic. So this is the topic of my body paragraph number 1 and the topic of my body paragraph number 2. Okay? And I still haven't read the passage. Haven't even read the passage, but I know that my answer will look like this. And just giving this answer can get a point. So if you have students who aren't getting any points, just having this answer could get a point. Now, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to, now that we know what we're looking for, And we have skimmed the multiple choice and the short constructed response. Now what we're going to do is we're going to go to the passage. All the while remembering what it is we're supposed to write. And I have the students practice, 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 and starting in January and February, of course, we've been practicing. And so we've been practicing summarizing, because one of the issues that we have to remember is that we don't know if the students know or understand what they're reading. I mean, that is a big challenge across the state of Texas right now. Many of the students, they'll read it, but they don't really understand what it is they're reading. Sometimes it's because they're EB students. Sometimes it's because they're just struggling readers. Sometimes it's a test situation. And so what we want to do is we want to teach our students to summarize the text. And so what I am going to do is I'm going to show you how we do that. Here, with my red pen, making sure you're seeing what I'm seeing here. With the red pen, I'll make it a little bit bigger for you so you can see it. We read the title and it says Back in Time, the National Road. And so I say to the students, well, back in time, that means it's going to be something about history. And so you could write the word history in red right here, because you're going to be thinking about, okay, this is about something in history, probably. Again, we're still getting them there. And then we start reading, and this is paragraph 1, paragraph 2. And in each paragraph, we're going to summarize it over here. Now on the test, where we're going to summarize it is going to be on this passage 1. We're going to summarize it right here, and I'll show you that in a minute. But when we're practicing, and I can print out the passage for the students, we read, the National Road, in many places known as Route 40, was built between 1811 and 1834 to reach the western settlements. And so I'm going to do what I call a think aloud with the students, and I'm going to show them how a good scholar reads and annotates. And so this is about the National Road. And over here, I'm going to write National Road. And I can teach my students how to abbreviate when they're summarizing. In many places known as Route 40, was built between 1811 and 1834 to reach the western settlements. Now watch how I am underlining very specifically certain words and parts of words even. I tell the students, I want you to underline. When you're underlining, I want you to underline less than or equal to 5 words in a row, because I don't want them to be highlighting the whole paragraph. So we have National Road, Route 40, built 1811 to 1834 to reach the west. And that's what I'm summarizing here, right? George Washington, it was the first federally funded road in U.S. history. That's important. So I'm going to write first federally funded. Now I'm learning if my students are getting the nuggets out of these paragraphs, if they're reading it and understanding it. George Washington and Thomas Jefferson believed that a trans-Appalachian road was necessary for unifying the young country. See, what's important about that? The purpose of it was to unify, right? To unify the country. In 1806, Congress authorized construction of the road, and President Jefferson signed the act establishing the National Road. It would connect Cumberland, Maryland to the Ohio River. I think I've gotten everything that I need for that. And then for paragraph number 2, I've got in 1811, the first contract was awarded and the first 10 miles of road built. By 1818, the road was completed to Wheeling and mail coaches began using the road. By the 1830s, the federal government conveyed part of the road's responsibility to the states through which it runs. Toll gates and toll houses were then built by the states, with the federal government taking responsibility for road repairs. So here in this paragraph, it's just talking about the progress that was being made, right? So I'm thinking this is just about the progress. Is it that important? I don't remember a question asking about that, but if I do remember a question, then I'll know where to go. So you see, this first paragraph has quite a bit of important information, but this is just talking about the building of the road and the progress that it was making. Then we have this map. And we tell the students, make sure you look at the map. And here's the road right here. And it's showing all the cities, right? So these are the states. The map is showing the states and the cities. And I can read these cities, but I think what I want to do is I want to make sure that I understand that it started in Pennsylvania. And this is a great opportunity to teach the students the abbreviations of states. And then it went to West Virginia. And then it went to Ohio. And then Indiana. And then Illinois. My mother would have really I would have gotten in trouble for putting the S. There is no noise in Illinois, right? So that's what I got out of that. And then as I go to paragraph 3, I start reading, as work on the road progressed, a settlement pattern developed that is still visible. So this is the topic sentence, and it's talking about a settlement pattern developed that is still visible, where original towns and villages are found along the national road, right? So original towns and villages are found along the national road, many barely touched by the passing of time. So in my mind, I'm thinking, okay, this is important that we've got these settlement patterns. And I'm going to quote that original towns and villages were there. And then I'm also going to quote that they were barely touched by the passing of time. Now, why do I think that is important? Because I remember that my prompt said that, why travelers enjoy using the national road today. And I'm thinking the original towns and villages would be interesting, and that they were barely touched by the passing of time is also interesting. So I've got original towns and villages, and I've got barely touched by the passing of time. And so I'm going to quote these as my concrete details. The road, also called the Cumberland Road, and National Pike, and other names, became Main Street in these early settlements, earning the nickname the Main Street of America. So here, and I can write underneath here, I've got these names, and one was Cumberland Road, one was National Pike, and then the nickname was the Main Street of America. And the reason why I'm doing this is because, one, I'm making sure that the students are able to pull the important part from a paragraph. But the other reason is because when they're writing it on their paper and they're reading the multiple choice and the short constructed response and the extended constructed response, I want to make sure that they are able to pull from their notes and can find their notes, what they wrote and what they read easily. And then it talks about the height of the National Road's popularity came in 1825 when it was celebrated in song, story, painting, and poetry. And so I'm going to put popularity here, and I'm going to write celebrated 1825 with song, story, painting, and poetry. And then during the 1840s, popularity soared again. Travelers and drovers westward bound crowded the inns and taverns along the route. So to me, that's what I'm going to summarize it by say 1840s, there was a westward movement, right? 1840s westward movement, and there were the inns and taverns along the route. And then there are these huge Conestoga wagons hauled produce from frontier farms to the East Coast, returning with staples such as coffee and sugar for the Western settlements. So I've got produce, coffee, and sugar. And so there's food that's being transported. See, I'm summarizing. I'm teaching students how to summarize. They don't know how to summarize. They don't know how to do it. I have to teach them through a think aloud, and we practice. And then I will put them, I will model this for them, and then I will divide them into groups, and I'll say, okay, group number one, you summarize paragraph number one, and you're going to present it to the class. Group number two, you're going to summarize paragraph number two and present it to the class. And so then we learn how to summarize, and that helps with our reading. Thousands moved west in covered wagons, and stagecoaches traveled the road, keeping the regular schedule. And what is important to me is that thousands of people, right? There were thousands of people. So the summarizing is done with the paper, right? With on the actual passage when we're practicing it. But when we are actually in the test, you'll notice that what I've done is I've taken this for the passage and I've made my notes right here. Right? Settlement patterns, original towns and villages, barely touched by the passing of time. Here are the names, right? Here are the names of it, of the different names that it was called. Celebrated in 1825, popularity, see? That's what I already wrote. And then when I get into this second page right here, and we hadn't quite finished the fourth paragraph, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to read in the 1870s, however, the railroads came. And some of the excitement faded. So let me finish it. I have to finish it on this side, right? Starting the fourth paragraph. In the 1870s, however, the railroads came and some of the excitement faded. And so you can see me write 1870s railroads. And then I say to the students, you know, we're talking about trains, right? And the excitement faded. And then watch how it starts talking about in 1912, the road became part of the National Old Trails Road. So I underline this because I'm thinking, here's another name for it. And so these are the names, the different names that it was called, right? And here's another name. And its popularity returned in the 1920s with the automobile. Federal aid became available for improvement. Hold on one second. Federal aid became available for improvements in the road to accommodate the automobile. In 1926, the road became part of US 40 as a coast-to-coast highway. See, I'm taking my notes? As the interstate system grew throughout America, interest in the national road again waned. And I'll say to my kids, that means lessened, because I've got to teach them vocabulary. However, now when we want to have a relaxing journey, and I come up here, when we want to have a relaxing journey with some history thrown in, we again traveled the national road. Cameras capture old buildings, bridges, and old stone mile markers. Old brick schoolhouses from early years sporadically dot the countryside, and some are found in the small towns on the national road. Many are still used, some are some are converted to a private residence, and others stand abandoned. So you'll notice I'm writing this relaxing journey, old buildings, bridges, old stone mile markers, and brick schoolhouses. So that ends paragraph 4. And then I go to paragraph 5, which talks about historic stone bridges. And so historic stone bridges on the National Road have their own stories to tell, as well as reminding us of the craftsmen of early engineers. So what I'm thinking to myself, this is interesting, and people might find this interesting, right? They might find this interesting about these old buildings, bridges, old stone mile markers, old brick houses. This historic stone bridge might be of interest to some people, or they might be interested in the craftsmanship of early engineers. The S Bridge, so named because of its design, stands 4 miles east of Old Washington, Ohio. Built in 1828 as part of the National Road, it is a single arch stone structure. This one of 4 in the state is deteriorated and is now used for only pedestrian traffic. However, the owners of the bridge are attempting to obtain funding for its restoration. And so I'm thinking to myself, okay, this is about the S Bridge. And then the next one is about the Stone Castleman River Bridge, still stands east of Grantsville, Maryland. And then this is the information about the Castleman Bridge. So I'm summarizing, so I'll know where to find it. In paragraph 5, if there's a question about the Castleman Bridge, I'm going to go into paragraph 5. And then when I get to paragraph 6, where it says mile markers have been used in Europe for more than 2,000 years, and our European ancestors continued that tradition here in America. See, used in Europe, continued tradition here. These markers tell travelers how far they are from their destination and more an important icon, see right here, were an important icon in early national road travel. As children, we saw them and asked our parents what they were. As adults, we nostalgically seek them out for photographing. And as I'm doing this, I could even put quotation marks around it, right? Important icon. Nostalgically seeking them out for photographing. Why? Because I'm thinking that people might enjoy it because nostalgically, and I'm going to teach my students what this word means, or I'm going to make sure that they look it up in a dictionary or thesaurus to see other words that will help them, that it's sentimental, right? That they go for sentimental reasons. A drive-through national road towns usually reveals one of these markers, such as the one standing by the historic Red Brick Tavern in Lafayette, Ohio. And so the final paragraph it's the conclusion, and it has quite a bit of interesting information that I can use. In the 1960s, Interstate 70, leaving many businesses by the wayside, bypassed Route 40 and much of the national road. See how I write that right there? The emphasis was on faster cars and quicker arrival time. We scurry along at a hurried pace today, but when we want to relax and take our time and see some sights, we once again travel the national road. The timeless little villages in quiet hamlets and valleys beckon us to small restaurants for a home-cooked meal and a trip back in time to when the pace of life was slower and less stressful. So what I've done here on this page is I have taught my students how to summarize the passage. Now, this is a pretty long passage, but of course it's English 1. The middle school and elementary passages are shorter. But this is a summary, and I would take a grade on this between now and April. We would be doing this, and I would be taking grades on their ability to summarize, because there's usually a summary question. There are all different kinds of questions that point to certain paragraphs, and I think that this is a very helpful way for you to determine whether your students are understanding what they're reading and for the students to be able to use it on the test. So now we're ready to start pre-writing. And I'm looking at this and I'm thinking to myself that the question is, why do travelers enjoy using the national road today? And so as I look at this, I think to myself that all of this really is, I'm picking up my blue pen because I'm thinking about my topic sentences. This is just more like information, historical information about it, right? This also talks about the map and those kinds of things. So I'm not that impressed with this to answer my question yet. But then we get to the settlement patterns, and I'm looking at original towns and villages barely touched by the passing of time. And I'm thinking, this historical information, who would be interested in reading this? Well, right off the top of my head, and this is what I would do with my kids, I would say, this might not be interesting to you. You might say to me, gosh, Miss Lewis, I definitely wouldn't want to go to the national road. It sounds boring. Okay, but who would, is what I would say to the kids. Who would want to go to the national road? Probably my parents. Right. And definitely my history teacher. Right. That's right. So don't think that it's just for you, right? When you're answering questions, think of what audience would want to go. And so if your history teacher wanted to go, the history teacher would want to go to learn about history. And so, you know, for historical reasons, right? And so as we're looking at this and we come down, what else would they want to know? This is more information, come up here. This here, that it's a relaxing journey with some history thrown in, and they get to see old buildings, bridges, and old stone mile markers, right? And old brick schoolhouses. Again, that might be something that your history teacher would want to see, right? And these historic stone bridges have stories to tell us and to see the craftsmanship. Again, this is kind of about history. You know, my history teacher would want to see that. He'd want to go, or she'd want to go to the S Bridge and the Castleman River Bridge and to see these mile markers. And so this to me is a lot about history. But then also I see this relaxing journey. And I'm thinking, my grandparents like to relax and travel, right? And then down here it talks about the fast paced, right? That because we have these interstate highways and everybody's going really fast in their fast cars, and to get there faster, and this hurried pace today, that they, some people want to relax and take their time and see some simple sights, right? So I'm thinking that here we're thinking about slowing down, right? And seeing the sights. And I'm thinking maybe vacation, right? And where it's quiet and it's a slower and less stressful pace. And so when I come up here, I'm thinking to myself that I'm going to have two body paragraphs. And one is going to be the historical, that it's interesting for historical reasons. And then the other is going to be, I'm going to talk about maybe vacation or slowing down. So when I come over here, I'm going to teach my students, my 9th graders and 10th graders. I'm going to say, okay, so when we look at this topic sentence, that we might say, travelers enjoy using the national road today because of this and this. And I said because of history and because to slow down, right? And so I'm going to go straight to my concrete details, and I'm going to pull the historical reasons. And so when I look at the historical reasons, I like this part about, and I find it right here, I have it right here, history, original towns and villages, barely touched by the passing of time. And I don't need all of this. I'm just going to pick a few. But I like this one, and I'm going to write original towns and villages, because I think my history teacher wants to see the original towns and villages. And I like this part about barely touched by the passing of time. I kind of like this thing because over here, I think that my history professor would really like these stone bridges and the mile markers. I think that's important for my history teacher because I'm thinking, okay, I might not want to see it, but I bet my history teacher would want to see these historic stone bridges which have, I like this idea about stories to tell. So I'm gonna quote that. And then the other thing that I thought was good about that was for the history teacher, people who like history, to see the craftsmanship of early engineers. So I'm going to write the craftsmanship of early engineers. And finally, when I'm talking about these mile markers, I'm going to bring in the mile markers and the important icon. So that's going to be for this paragraph. I'm going to talk about the important icon. And somewhere in there, I'm going to write something about the mile markers. So that's my concrete details for the first paragraph about history. And when I get to vacation, I'm going to come over here and grab this relaxing journey. I think that's important. So I'm going to pick up relaxing journey and put it right here. That's a quote from the text. And that's why it's a CD. It's a quote from the text. And then this place where down here, so I'm going to grab the relaxing journey. I grab that. And then I'm also going to grab this part where it says, I think this is important because this nostalgic, you know how my grandparents, they think of the past, right? And so I like this sentimental, right? They're sentimental. And so I like this part about nostalgically seek out sites, right? Different sites for photographing. That's the second time I've done that. For photographing. So I like that. And then I'm going to come down here and I'm going to remind people about the hurried pace, that we need to relax and take our time, right? And I like this idea about slower and less stressful. So I'm picking out the concrete details I want to use. And so I'm going to put something in here about a hurried pace. I'm going to bring in something about relax and take our time. And then I'm going to write something about life slower and less stressful. Now, with your students, they don't have to write all of this. This is just, I'm writing this. This is just my showing you how they could write. Maybe they just want to take the historic stone buildings and the mile markers, and those are their only 2 CDs about history. So they don't have to do all of this. I just tell them to pick anywhere from 3 to 6, but 3's fine. Even 2 is fine, but I tell them 3 because if they do 2, sometimes they don't have enough to write their commentary over here. So I say 3 to 6, just write 3 to 6 concrete details on this left-hand side. And then what we're going to do is we're going to write our commentary. And we start in the middle with the first thing we think of. And then I tell my students to draw 6 lines. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And do the same thing down here when we get down here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay? And so the commentary asks, what is important about this side over here? And these are the people I say to myself, I'm talking to my kids, and you got to talk to yourself. You got to talk to yourself and ask the question, what is important about this stuff? Well, these are for people who like history. All right? And I'm going to teach them the vocabulary word buffs, that they are history buffs, right? That's a term that we use in English, history buffs, that they're interested in how America was built. So I'm thinking to myself, who are these people? They're interested in how America was built. That they have this passion. My history teacher has this passion for learning about history. And my history teacher gets excited when he or she talks about history, right? And especially when it's talking about like what this historic stone bridges, right? And the craftsmanship and the mile markers, because they want to look at the early early construction, right, of America. And I'm going to teach them the word, we would call that the infrastructure. So I have to teach them vocabulary as I'm doing this. We call that the early construction, the buildings and stuff that were built to help, to house people and stuff. That would have in the roads, that would be called the infrastructure. And they're interested in the craftsmanship. This is this old material that craftsmen used, to build things, the bricks for roads, all that kind of stuff. And I'm going to teach them the word, instead of old, maybe we use the word antiquated. So I'm teaching them vocabulary. And they're so interested in who or what shaped our nation, right? That's what they're always talking about. Who and what shaped our nation. So these are the thoughts that go through my head when I'm thinking about the history. And these are the thoughts that go through my head when I'm thinking about my grandparents, that they want to slow down. That they want a simpler life. And I'm going to teach my students the word they yearn, means they want or they long for a simpler life, right? That in this world, when there's the constant pressures of everyday life, they need some quiet, right? They need some quiet. They want to escape from the rat race, and they want an uncomplicated life. And the national road, where they relax and take our time, the life is slower and less stressful, and this nostalgic, right? Another word for nostalgic is sentimental. So this is kind of a sentimental journey that they can take on their vacation, right? So here are there's the commentary that goes with this concrete detail. And finally, for the introduction, what I talk about are the big ideas. So I say to my students, what are these big ideas? What, that come about? What lessons do you learn about this, right? What are you learning? Like, give me some big ideas, some words or phrases with big ideas. And I'm going to show you some examples. For example, this is about the past. It's about learning about the past. It's about seeing the past. It's also about the beauty that's around us. And, quite frankly, we're moving so fast. We need to think about how fast we move, right? So these are some big ideas. And when I think about the past and how it relates to what I just read, is we sometimes, I'm talking to my students, this is what I'm teaching them, and I wouldn't do this all in one day. I would do maybe the question and answer and summarizing the passage one day, and then the next day I would maybe do this part, and then the next day I would do this part, because you don't want to, you'll lose them if you try to do all this like I'm doing with you. We sometimes look at the past. See, somewhere in there is my part about the past as a time when life seemed easier. And this idea about beauty around us is, I could do a sentence just for that, or maybe I can combine these two. Maybe I can combine these two and write, when we are always moving so fast, we tend not to appreciate the beauty around us. And for my ninth graders, maybe they might say that we move too fast and we need to slow down. It might be that simple, right? And so you know your kids and you know the examples that you would give them based on how they write and how they're struggling. And so the next thing we do is we come up here and we're going to complete this part right here. And how are we going to complete this part? We're going to complete this part by looking at our green side. And so the thesis, this is our thesis, and we've got to have a thesis, right? So I'm going to write, travelers enjoy using the National Road today because they are either, and I'm going to grab this right here, history buffs, and maybe instead of or and, I'm going to say or, right? And I like this part right here. I like this part right here. Or they yearn for a simpler life. And that's going to be my thesis. And then I'm going to pick up my blue pen and I'm going to ask, some people, or think, some people, what am I going to use for my topic sentence? I like this right here. Some people are interested in how America was built. And I know that it's time for us to stop, but I'm going to keep going. And I understand if you need to leave. I'm going to finish in about 5 minutes. I'm going to show you the end result here in just a second. And then for this second one, I'm going to write another reason, because I have this transition right here, right? People like to visit the National Road is because, and I like this right here, that they want to slow down. And so now I have my two topic sentences, and now I'm going to put this all together. And the way I put it all together is I have my students write it out, and I'll show you what it looks like. I start with one of these big ideas, and I really like this one about the past. And so I'm going to grab this one and start my piece out with, we sometimes look at the past as a time when life seemed easier. So I've got that, and then travelers enjoy using the National Road today because they are either history buffs or they yearn for simpler time, right? And I got my first sentence from that, and then I got my thesis from here. Some travelers are interested in how America was built. Now I'm going to pick up my concrete details over here. Watch how I do this. Along the National Road are original towns and villages, which are barely touched by the passing of time. There are also historic stone bridges and other important icons, such as stone mile markers, with stories to tell and craftsmanship of early engineering. Now, I'm going to bring in some commentary. Some people have a passion for learning about the early infrastructure and antiquated materials used in early America. These people get excited about who and what shaped America. There's my first body paragraph. Second body paragraph. Another reason people like to visit the National Road is because they want to slow down. Traveling along the road is a relaxing journey where people nostalgically seek out sites for photographing. I finally said that word right the third time. In today's society, with the hurried pace, this journey helps us to relax and take our time to make life slower and less stressful. Now, here comes my commentary. With the constant pressures of everyday life, bam, some travelers want to escape, bam, into a time when they remember life as being quiet and uncomplicated. The National Road offers a sentimental journey into that life. I didn't use vacation. And I don't have to use all of it. I'm just showing you the way it goes. And so when I need my conclusion, and so from my conclusion, I'm going to use when we are always moving so fast. And what I'm going to show you now is the final draft typed up on my screen in color. And then when we are always moving so fast, we tend not to appreciate the beauty around us. And this is our ECR. It has 1103 characters with no spaces, 1,103 characters with no spaces. And this is how I teach my students to think and process the summary, that they have to summarize what they have read. They're going to choose what their two body paragraphs are going to be about. They're going to decide which concrete details they're going to use, give commentary about those concrete details, and from there, they're going to pick and stitch together their thesis, their topic sentence, their commentary and concrete detail, and their introduction and conclusion. And that's how we do it. And I'm going to stop now and ask if you have any questions, first of all, because I know I went fast. We didn't really get started until almost 15 minutes in. Good girl. I want you to ask questions, and I want you to unmute and tell me what is one takeaway, one or two takeaways that you have that you can implement in your classroom. I just want to say, remember that what you're seeing here, you don't have to do it that big or that many, but I just wanted to show you, what's available so that you can break it down and narrow it for your students.